Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Colour Cave. It's me Gem and this is the place where we like to play with art stuff. Also welcome to the video for the September Scrawler Challenge where the prompt was Jazz Noir. How very mystical. The contents of the box were a little bit different this time round and we were basically left with an array of black pens. If you'd like to see the original unboxing video, you can click the link in the card and that will take you to that video so that you can see all the goodies in their glory and finer detail. Just before we launch on with the main part of the video, I just wanted to remind everyone that today is your last day for entering the giveaway. If you'd like more details on the giveaway, you can click on this card and it will take you to the video with all the bits and bobs in it. Also, I shall leave the links for these other videos in the description too, just in case you don't get the cards. Winners of the giveaway will be announced this Friday. So you need to stay tuned and watch out for that video on Friday morning GMT to see if you are one of the lucky winners. Onward with the black pens and let's see if we can do something with Jazz Noir. So many black pens and I needed to make sure that I used them all as per my rules for the Scrawler Challenge. Here is my swatch chart from the unboxing video to guide me and help me out a little bit. I started with the graphic fine liner and quickly remembered that the lid doesn't stay on the end of the pen. However, this was the best choice for doing the line art and the general sort of sketching out of things, which is what I'm making a start on here. As per, I always make sure that I only use the implements and the supplies that come in the box. I never use anything else. So once again, this brings me back to not having a pencil. So I did take my time when I was drawing everything out and I drew some thumbnails in pencil in my sketchbook before I commenced on recording the video and doing the final edit, as it were. I was taking my time, something chronic. Most of you'll know I'm a little bit paranoid about making mistakes and then not being able to fix them because I am very much a pencil person. So in the box we had this selection of all these different black pens and I was determined that I was using every single one of them. And the idea that I had in my head was for a sort of old-fashioned poster. If anybody remembers or has seen silent films, they quite often have caption cards in between the scenes and for exclamations because obviously there was no voice. And because of the sheer volume of black ink that was available to me, that kind of stuck in my head when I was thinking about how to design it. And it sort of turned into like a poster of descriptions maybe. This jazz logo, it felt very natural to include the saxophone as the J, and after looking online, doing a quick Google search, it is a logo that has been used like a squillion times over, so no copyright infringement intended. The idea did come out of my head and it just so happened that I saw it elsewhere as well. The drawing of the instruments was quite funny. I can't even say that I'm a musician. I'm not a musician. I learned to play several instruments as a youngster and fortunately or unfortunately the saxophone wasn't one of them. So when I was drawing the saxophone, I was going purely on memory because I used to have a friend who played the saxophone and I was trying to remember details of the shape and, you know, all the different parts to it, you know, from a memory that was from about 15-20 years ago, so that was kind of difficult. However, I didn't want to put every single detail in. The drawing wasn't big enough, and if you've ever seen a saxophone in the flesh, they're pretty complicated. Incidentally, it was the same story with the trumpet as it was with the saxophone. I had friends in an orchestra who played the trumpet, and I was trying to go from memory and remember all the sort of bits and pieces. I don't think it's particularly accurate, and I know you get different types of trumpets, so I don't know whether this looks like a jazz trumpet or not. If anybody plays a jazz trumpet, you can always let me know. I was a string player, I played the violin, so I was sorely tempted to put in a double bass in the picture because I was pretty sure I could do that from memory reasonably well. However, it just didn't really fit in with the other things that I wanted to put in the drawing, so I scrapped that idea, probably against my better judgment, but never mind. I really like this Derwent graphic fine liner. It is a 0.3 nib and I really got into the swing of it. It's quite smooth and I was quite enjoying it, and it's one of those pens that I would love to continue to use. However, the whole pen cap thing just really puts me off, which is a bit of a shame. So I am undecided about the fate of this pen. It may end up in Mr. Gem's pen pot for his little farmy type office that he has. If that happens though, it will meet a sticky end due to the fact that he is a destroyer of things. So I might give it a bit more thought, and I might save it from a terrible fate. Going along with the idea of the cue cards or the caption cards in a silent movie, I wanted to put some sort of border around the outside of the picture. And I had to think carefully about how intricate I wanted to make that border, just simply due to the fact that having to go round it when I was filling in the background, I didn't want to put myself in a position where it became too complicated and I made a mistake, because obviously there is a degree of symmetry with a border, and that I could have set myself up for a mistake quite easily there. So I decided to keep it quite simple. I did also toy with the idea of using a ruler at this point, but it goes against my rules for doing Scrawler challenges because it was not something that came in the box. So I was a brave girl, I put my big girl pants on and I just drew the border freehand, and it actually, I was reasonably impressed with myself. It could have been better, it is not perfect by any stretch, however it's not too bad. So that was absolutely fine and dandy, and it was time to move on to the last part, which was a musical stave in the bottom left hand corner. So I used the fine liner to draw the stave, and that was pretty much the end of the use of that Derwent graphic pen, because I realised I had 7 other pens that I still needed to use. By far my least favourite pen out of the selection we have was this Edding permanent marker, and I basically just used it here as a token gesture to say that I'd used it. I can't stand the smell of them, and I was kind of struggling with where I was going to incorporate it into the picture, so the black piano keys seemed like a good idea. If it hadn't been an alcohol-based permanent marker, I would probably have used it to fill in the background, because it's got a great big chunky chisel tip on it, and it would have filled the area quite quickly. However, it's just, I absolutely detest those pens, so that was that done, and I could say I'd used it. This is the Sakura brush pen, which I thought would be nice for drawing the treble clef and the notes. And I worked my way along and I was doing my thing, and then I realised that I made a boo-boo and the tail that comes off one of the notes goes in the wrong direction. I remembered again after digging in the deepest recesses of my mind that the tails on the notes that face down the way go at the top of the stave and not the bottom. However, we'll just call it artistic licence. This pen was great, and I feel as if I didn't really use it to its full potential when I was drawing here, but it's definitely a pen that I'm going to use again for other things, because the tip is lovely on it. It's very soft, but there's still quite a lot of control on it. Onto the Stabilo, however you want to pronounce it, I don't care. And I started to use this for a little bit of detail and worked a little bit on the saxophone. It has a slightly chunky nib, and I found that it worked well for details that you wanted to stand out but not take over the picture. The Art Sticks pen was a little bit less black, you know what I mean. It was heading more into grey than some of the other pens, so I decided to use that and the little zebra pen which I've got here, which was the one that looked really grey. So I thought using them for sort of a shading type effect, I'd set it out in my mind that that's what I was gonna set those 2 pens aside for, and that worked really well for me. On to the Centra pen, which again was really just a token gesture. As far as a pen to draw with goes, it's absolutely terrible, and I just used it for the inside of the saxophone just to say that I'd used it basically. So that was absolutely fine. Moving on. I used the same technique for the trumpet as I did for the saxophone in putting some detail and some shading and things in. So I went between the art sticks, which is the Lego type pen you can see there, and the zebra pen, which is the slightly greyish one. I kind of wanted the piano keys to have a bit more detail to them, but because I was going to fill the background in solid black, I didn't want to take away from the contrast with the white of the keys too much, but I was really unhappy just leaving it as it was, so I've put in a little bit of shading just along the side of the keys there, just to sort of kind of meet that halfway point between adding some detail and not taking away from the actual whole point of the piano keys themselves. And after that I went back to the Stabilo pen and I basically used this as an outline and a sort of protective buffer, because I used the Pentel ink brush to fill in the background, and with the brush being really soft and the tip being very, very, very fine, it comes to like a really long point. I was kind of worried that I might go over the edge and I might not be able to get a nice solid line with it in places, so I basically outlined the items that I'd drawn as a sort of layer of protection in case my hand was a little bit wayward. So that kind of you know, that was kind of like a good idea in my head, but also as well I tried to match it up as closely to the Pentel brush as possible in terms of the ink colour, because I didn't want those outlines standing out against the water brush as well. The ink brush, not the water brush. Come on, Jem. You can see here that I've started to use it, and the idea that I had in my head was that I could get some nice broad strokes with it, and I found when I tried it out, it had a really good ink flow, and you only needed to squeeze it a tiny little bit to get the ink flow to come out a little bit faster, which would let me work faster when I was doing the background. Because it had that long fine point on it as well though, it was very, very good for getting into the corners where I've put the border on, and I could get into the tiny little spaces in the swirls without too much hassle as well. The control that I had over the brush, I kind of surprised myself with it, and I like to use water brushes, which most of you know by now, and I'm kind of used to using them, but the difference with those is obviously it's just water, and if you sort of splosh a bit somewhere where it's not supposed to be, well, you just wait for it to dry, don't you, and then you can carry on. But it's obviously a skill that I'm building up and something that I'm getting better at, because there were very few areas where I didn't feel as if I had control of the brush tip, so that was kind of good for me as well. Just working my way around now, starting to fill in the background, and you can see there's points where I'm going for it. With the bigger areas I'm just like squishing the brush everywhere, which is great, and taking my time a little bit more in the sort of tighter spaces. I absolutely love this pen, like I adore it. The ink flow is perfect. It's really easy to control, which is always a concern of mine with these types of brushes, whether it's with a water brush or an ink version like this. But this Pentel brush is something else. I really enjoy it. My only problem is, and it's not really a problem at all, I would love to use this more in the future. In fact, I would go as far as to say as I would be tempted to buy them in some of the other colours that you can get, but in truth, realistically, I don't know when I would use them. I'm not a huge drawer in ink at the best of times, and I certainly don't do a lot of colouring in ink, and if I do, it tends to be with Copic markers. So I think if I bought these, it would just be on a jolly. I don't actually think that they would get put to good use, and it's one of those things where I'd play about with and then not really use them. So I don't know if it's something that I pursue or not. If you are someone who likes to do hand lettering, I would suggest you buy them all. Buy them all, because they are really, really lovely. Or if you're a person that likes to ink with a brush when you are creating an artwork, or even if you're colouring in, then I would highly recommend these. But I just think with me, being a person that likes to know that their supplies are in regular use, I don't think I could justify buying them all for them to sort of sit and then just for me to play about with them, which is a shame, because yeah, I really liked it. As I was working round here, it did occur to me the possibility that I might run out of ink. I'm not entirely sure how much ink is in the barrel of these Pentel pens, and I'm sure I read somewhere that you can refill them. I might just be making that up. I'll have to double check after I've finished this filming, but the thought did occur to me, because I was using such a large volume of ink, that if the barrel wasn't particularly big or particularly full, that I could end up with an unintentional gradient from grey through to black as I worked my way up towards the top of the picture. But I did not have any problems with that at all. There's still plenty of ink on the go, and once I finished, I actually gave the barrel a bit of a squish just to see how much ink would squash down into the clear chamber, which is just above the nib, and there was still absolutely tons like shooting through there. So I don't even think that I've used the bulk of it in doing this picture, and there's hardly going to be anything left in it. Once again, not that it's really a concern, because I have no idea when else I'm going to use this pen, but I might have to have a think about it and come up with something else to use it for, because I have this overwhelming urge to keep using it. I'll need to put my thinking cap on. If you guys have any suggestions for another use for this pen, or another drawing that I could do with it, please feel free. I'm always open to suggestions, as you know, and you could leave me a comment, and I will certainly add it to my list of ideas, because it would be nice to get some more use out of it. There was literally zero space to sign this, so I've just initialed it inside one of the piano keys just so that I had somewhere to do it. But anyway, that is it all done using all 8 pens. I am quite satisfied that I managed to do that. Ta-da! So I hope you've enjoyed this. Give it a thumbs up if you like it, and we'll see you again in the cave.